record button, and boom. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Black Capitalism podcast. I'm your host, Rod, joined as always by my co-host,
Karen.
and we're live on a Sunday afternoon, ready to give you guys some podcasting. Find us wherever you get podcasts. Search the Black Guy Tips. Leave us 5-star reviews, of course. Make them nice. We'll read them on the air. That's how that works. Don't make them nice or don't make them 5 stars, and it's like we can't even see that. And in addition to that, you can always leave feedback. Look at the show notes. Our website. We have posts for each episode, polls for each episode. You can also go to our YouTube page, leave comments on our YouTube videos, social medias, all that stuff, email address, voicemail line. It's all there. So if you ever feel that FOMO when you're listening to a feedback episode, like, I had something to say, well, there you go. And in addition to that, you can come to our live chat room on crowdcast.io and hang out with us, watch us record live, and get to meet these great guests and play the games and all the stuff that we do here. Speaking of great guests, today's guest is the author of Black Capitalism, A Blueprint for What is Possible, Dr. Rachel Laryea. Hey, what's going on? How you doing?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Happy Sunday.
Oh no, happy
Same to
Sunday to you as well.
you.
What made you interested in like black capitalist as a focal point to write a book about?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have been interested in this topic and really in the topic of race and money and capitalism ever since I was a kid. I just had different language for it at that time. And when I was a child, I think every correlation that I saw to wealth and economic thriving was associated with whiteness. It was the case that I grew up in these spaces of privilege, but never felt like I had authority in them myself. So, for example, my mother, who immigrated to the US from Ghana, where she was born and raised, was able to buy her own home in the US through an affordable housing program where she won a lottery that gave her access to do so. And that home was located in one of the wealthiest counties in Northern Virginia, where I grew up. And so I would see these kind of nuclear white families with the dog, the white picket fences, the overzealous parent teacher associations, all of that. But I was having a very different experience being part of that community in it, but not really of it. And then fast forward, I went to an all girls college prep school that cost $60,000 a year to go to, and I was on a full ride scholarship. And so again, I was seeing these expressions and displays of wealth that were so often associated with whiteness. It got me just wondering and thinking, man, like, what does it look like to be Black and wealthy? And what is the cost in order to achieve that or have that kind of lived experience? And so by the time I was in college, which I did at NYU, and I was studying so much of Black studies, critical race theory, the Black radical tradition, I had this kind of trajectory of what I was going to do. I wanted to go to grad school, but I just so happened to get recruited by Goldman Sachs. And at that time, I didn't know anything about investing, about finance. And it was really at the behest of my older brother who said, you should just, try this out, see what they're talking about when it comes to an internship at the firm, because it might change your life. And so, sure enough, I interned, ultimately worked there full time. And it was while I was at Goldman that I saw how Black people were participating in capitalism in ways that were complicated, that were nuanced, and really kind of ruptured for me everything that I knew growing up about that kind of a correlation I meant before around wealth and whiteness. And so to see how people could be both critical of an economic system for good reason, because capitalism produces all of these harms that we're so familiar with, but that to then use the tools of capitalism in service of themselves and service of their communities in a way that was indicative of social good felt really nuanced to me. And that's what really got me excited to pursue this formally, go to grad school, build a whole research study around this, and then ultimately the book as well. And so it really started from my own kind of internal wonderings as a kid around race and money. And then it showed up in this way as a book years after.
It sounds like you were a first generation, like in from a, like born in America, like from your line. That experience is a little different than people that are born and raised here. How, whenever you talk to people about this, how do black people from America respond to you talking about this? And how do black people kind of from your culture, from the older generation respond to this? 'Cause I know different cultures have different experiences, kind of back and forth, and their own biases on both sides. And I know sometimes the language is not the same, even though in reality, we're all in the same boat. But people kind of view it different based on that.
Oh, for sure. And I think one of the ways this kind of crystallized was, and I'll tell you a story. 2 years into my doctoral program at Yale, all the students are responsible for giving what they call a prospectus, where you kind of go up on stage, you tell all the folks, especially in the African American Studies department at Yale, what you're going to research, what you're going to study about, and how you're going to do it. And so I said, I'm going to be studying Black capitalists throughout the transatlantic financial industry, given my experiences at Goldman. And after my presentation, one of my Black American colleagues, who also pursued her PhD, a brilliant scholar, she raised her hand and she said, Black capitalists don't exist. She said, at best, they can be Black financiers, but they can't be capitalists. And what she was saying was really kind of invoking this larger critique about the legacy and the creation of American capitalism and its unique kind of application within the Black community born and raised in America. Because the idea of being a Black capitalist, regardless of the fact that I define it anew, regardless of the fact that I define Black capitalism anew, it creates this kind of trouble in mind when you're suggesting this idea of like, how can you adopt an economic system whereby we were the laborers of it, our kind of ancestors were the laborers of it, but we never got to be the beneficiaries of it. And so it creates this like really particular tension that makes even this conversation that I'm wanting to have and this way in which I'm wanting us to think about things difficult to have. And so I make a lot of space for that and acknowledge the kind of the tensions based on where we sit geographically and the kind of migration patterns that we have. Because you did say, while we were all in the same boat, there are nuances to our different experiences. And so we have to make space for that. Because I think, too, for the immigrant experience, my mom's experience, and even mine as a kind of byproduct of that, my relationship to capitalism has its differences because I don't have that kind of historical legacy that my Black American peers, brothers and sisters might have. And so all of that gets accounted for as we think about, okay, we know the capitalism that we exist in today is extractive, it's exploitative, it's harmful. But we also know that there are more Black millionaires in this country than there have ever been. We also know that capitalism isn't getting dismantled tomorrow. And so, how do we move from this moment into a more liberatory one? And what are the tools in which we're going to use in this moment to get us to that place? It's not about saying capitalism is good or bad. It's about recognizing the reality of things and using the tools available to us working in community in order to kind of get to that more liberatory future. And so that's really the offering that I have in this book, and acknowledging all of the nuances, the differences, even though there's still opportunity for us to move with one unified voice and with unified action.
Yeah, I really like when the like PR person reached out about this interview. I said yes so fast because we talk about this on our show a lot just in general. Because I do find that like some of the flattening of our conversations via social media, it loses a lot of nuance, right? And so it just becomes like X person is bad, this person is good, or this system is so bad that nothing good can come of it, and I do understand those things, but at least in my experience, I feel like Black people navigate capitalism differently as a whole because we've been the capital in America. So we have like even a lot of the people that are defined as Black capitalists in America, it seems like it's more about how much wealth they've managed to either accumulate or be responsible for, which I think is another like misnomer. People often look at like, oh, so and so's a billionaire. It's like, their evaluation is that of a billionaire is not necessarily the same. Like if you ask them to go get $1 billion at the bank, they can't.
Right.
But it doesn't mean they're not rich or whatever. But the way that people get their money in the Black community, a lot of times, I feel like they get lumped in the same as like, you know, a Elon Musk or somebody. And I'm like, to me, those are two different paths to getting money. And especially when you don't really own like the means of production, a lot of times Black people they make money off of, I'm talented and people want to see my talent. So therefore I've earned this money. But there's a person even above that, you know, there's a, like, Beyonce is a billionaire. I don't even know who owns Ticketmaster, but I got a feeling that the person that owns Ticketmaster is probably clocking even more, right? LeBron James will eventually be a billionaire if he's not already, but the people that own the teams that he plays for all have more money than him. So how would you define like capitalism in mass versus like Black capitalism in your opinion?
Yes. And so that's why definitions are so important. I love that you asked that question. I think it's important to recognize capitalism as just first and foremost an economic system whereby private actors engage in order to create excess capital for themselves. But to be a Black capitalist, as I define it, is to be a person who identifies as a Black person and repositions themselves within the economic system in order to create social good. So this is drastically different than what we understand capitalism to be, because that's about profitability. It's about output. Whereas to be a Black capitalist, it's about how do you reposition yourself in the economic system strategically while also creating social good. It's like securing the bag, securing the people. They go hand in hand. And then to practice Black capitalism, it's the same thing. The only difference is it's race agnostic. So this is any individual or collective that does that work of repositioning themselves in order to create social good. And I think when it comes to the Black community, even how we get our money, how we get access to capital, it's very much more communal forward because of lack of access we get in other kind of structures or systems. And so we have to look inwards in order to kind of really build the resources, monetary, human capital, social capital, et cetera, in order to, create new avenues for ownership for ourselves. And so that's the definition that I have for a Black capitalist and for Black capitalism, which again is very different than kind of the capitalism that we know and what it nurtures, which is a scarcity mindset, individualism, exploitation. But I do believe, and there's evidence for how you can build and be invested in sustainable and scalable businesses and manners of just behaving in the economic system where you're able to create that excess in capital while also making sure that it's not coming at the consequence of exploiting other people in the process of it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Me and Roderick, we kind of have the same philosophy on this. Not all, because there's always exceptions to the rules, but most wealthy and / rich Black people give back to their community in masses more than any other racial group. Like, and a lot of times we do it out of the love for our people. And a lot of these people invest, but they might not, their names are not always attached to. A lot of them want to do it privately because a lot of times I don't want to say it's frowned upon, but maybe the circles they're in, they might not want to be publicly associated with it and things like that. Maybe they just want to kind of just have their money flow and help the people and have the people benefit from it without that connection.
I remember when people were going hard on Jay-Z and Beyonce because Jay-Z is like, Mr. Hustle. Like everything is a hustle for him. Like it's like, how can we get some money out of this? Like he's not showing up for free. He raps about it. He tells you about it. It's not like a secret for him. But even within his work, like Roc Nation does so much charitable work. They do so much legal work for like inmates in prison and stuff. So like it's this weird amalgamation of like, yeah, I'm trying to get to as much bread as possible, but there's always like this idea of like, but also help out the community and whatever. But what I think was interesting is they were getting it heavy, like right as Black Lives Matter started jumping off. And then people found out, not from them, but I believe it was like the forget her name now, but the woman who wrote like the the blueprint, whatever the book was that Jay-Z had. I forget what the author's name is, but she went on Twitter and was like, they bailed out all these people. They gave us the funds to bail out the protesters who were arrested for protesting for I think it was in maybe Minneapolis or something. But the point being, like, they didn't promote that. They didn't tell us that. They didn't like leak that. They would have gone to their graves with many people being like, you rich SOBs, you don't care about our community. But clearly they do, and there's other work they are public about where clearly they do. But I definitely feel like that is a feature of a lot of Black people who make money, whether you call them capitalist or you just call them Black people that got rich. Whichever way it is, it feels like there's a connection there. And part of that, I wonder, and I don't know how much you wrote about this, but part of it also wonders how much of it is just how recent Black people get money. Like, like it's not necessarily generational wealth that is, oh, this money's been in my family for 10 generations and it just got handed down to me. Why would I feel a connection to some other Black person that doesn't have anything? Some of these stories are like, Beyonce is a first generation person that's rich. Jay-Z, literally born in the projects. Like, so many of these stories, it feels like in their lifetime, they have seen poverty. They've had connections to community in a way that almost won't allow them to turn a blind eye to the rest of us.
Yeah. And something I want to add to, I think, further even create the nuance here is that it's a particular identity to be a Black capitalist, because one can be a Black person participating in capitalism, but that does not mean you're invested in social good. Because it could be that you're actually reproducing the harms of capitalism, and you can be just like colonizers, like oppressors, but a Black person doing it. And so to have a kind of Black capitalist orientation and identity, it's really about saying and choosing that I'm going to move economically and financially in a way that's going to not only, secure economic thriving for myself, but also to do it in a way that gives access to other people to do it as well. And so that becomes an important kind of fixture because, you mentioned Jay-Z and Beyonce, and they get critiqued front, back, center, for them being who they are, them having access to resources and whatnot. But I think it's always important to kind of keep in mind too, this question of like, what does it really mean to be a Black capitalist? Like, what does it mean to, as a kind of point of distinction, just participate in capitalism? Because that question of like, am I producing harm in the behaviors that I, pursue? That becomes like the critical point that we have to really examine. So I just wanted to add that to just further layer on how we can think.
Sure. And I'm just bringing them up because they're such prominent examples, but like, there are so many Black people that have money. They're not singers. You know what I mean? They're not rappers. We don't know their names necessarily. And similar things, like I know for me, I was involved in Inroads when I was a kid, this like program for academically talented Black youth to like try to get internships and all this stuff. And I met Black people who had money, who had resources, who had the jobs that, all the stuff that you want as a kid when you're like coming up and you're like, oh my God, how do I be like you? And they were spending their Saturdays helping me. Like, they help, and not just me, but all these Black kids in that way. And so I'm reading this book. It's called Black Broadway in Washington, D.C. And it goes into a lot of Black history and stuff. And one of the things recently, the part that I'm reading talked about how right as the Civil War was happening in America, Black people were fleeing the South. They were coming up to the North. And for a lot of them, the stop was Washington, D.C. Like, they were like, we're calling this freedom, right here. We're posting up and we ain't going back. So the things that got interesting for me was like, so Jim Crow starts like almost like 8 years after the Civil War ends. And Jim Crow is, of course, back to like, look, Black people got to eat over here, you got to live here, you can't do this, you can't do that. And so even wealthy Black people, end up being basically pushed out of money, like, right? So like your connections to whiteness, white banks, that like their banks are now just passing rules like we don't give money to black people. It's like, well, I started a business, I'm good for it, and like, you black, sorry. And so in a way it made people, for the next 100 years of Jim Crow to the civil rights era with segregation and stuff, it made black people have to be together. Like you didn't, so like if you wanted to continue to own a black bank, you now have 100% black customers, and and you don't have the ability to get a loan from whatever, the Chase family or whoever. It's just you and the black people. And I wonder, like, how did that affect our views on like what capitalism for black people can be? Because it almost it almost necessitates you have to be community based. At that point, like in the last like 50 years, you kind of don't have to be, but like for a long period of time, even if you were like an asshole, you had to be like, well, the black people are the people that have to rent from me because those are the only people I can rent to. So do you see those distinctions in still to this day in like how different black people look at like money and capitalism and acquiring wealth?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it shows up so visibly, I think, in the beliefs that so many of us carry around capitalism, because it's hard to imagine being on the winning side of something when we've been strategically and systemically positioned to be on the losing side of it. Because, when I talk to people, and I've interviewed hundreds of people in the creation of this book, people will say, when I ask them, how do you define capitalism? They say it's the root of all evil. Wall Street's the belly of the beast. Capitalism needs to be dismantled. It has no kind of, and again, it's not about positive or negative, but it just kind of gets rooted in these kind of really visceral feelings about whether it be informed by economic trauma, intergenerationally, this idea that you kind of just can't break free from debt, or just even this kind of psychology around money and the anxiety that we can have around money, especially in the socio-political climate that we're living in now. And so I think it shows up, and it becomes why people might say, like, capitalism, capital C, it's this big bad thing that it's just this engine, and we're just cogs in this engine, and we're just trying to get by and trying to maintain. And it's kind of disassociated from this sense of like agency or a sense of empowerment within it, but rather this thing that's kind of happened to us, and we're just trying to survive in the midst of it. And that is a very real reality. And I think it speaks to when the structures that have created marginalized experiences for us, where we have to tap into community in order to pull resources together, in order to just thrive in the different ways and just meet our needs at a basic level. It creates these negative associations to capitalism. But I think it becomes then why the critiques are as they are. As I've been, talking with people and sharing this work, it comes back to what one of my colleagues said: Black capitalists don't exist. The idea that, okay, rather than to question capitalism itself and where we can embed agency into our participation of it, rather we place limitations on who we are within the context of capitalism and who we can be within the context of it, because we haven't seen a model whereby it could be different in our relationship in it as a capitalist versus the laborer, because we're always in that laborer commodity position. So what could it even look like for us to be agents in the reproduction of capitalism with that communal mindset that we've really had to have, like you spoke to, Rod? And so I think it shows up in the beliefs. But what's so exciting to me is that if we can, open the aperture about what we believe and what we can do, because there's evidence for it and the reality of this moment, then it also opens the aperture for the behaviors that we can have within it and create new outcomes that are more indicative of people's needs being met, the most vulnerable populations being taken care of and secured. And so I think that's the real opportunity. But the conversation around capitalism and our participation and relationship to it has been so informed by our history for good reason. But I think there's so much room to think about how can it be informed by this moment that we're living in and this kind of newness of even having resources within the Black community that feels so new for people. It's a first generation experience even. And then how can we think about our relationship to capitalism in a future facing kind of moment as, you know, more and more people get access to wealth for the first time, build intergenerational wealth, even at a global scale, not just in an American context.
For and and I think for a lot of people, and for me, I think I'm one of the kind of, when you go generational, I am better off than a lot of my family members, like a lot of my older family members. There's some family members that are better off than me, but when you're dealing with this, it's very hard to give hope to people in a system like this, because I think the biggest thing is hope, because you're coming to them saying that it can change, and people going, well, how can it change when we had these cities and they were burnt down? We had our own shit. The things that people are telling to do us they're telling now. Like, people act like they have these brand new ideas when they be like, have your own things. It's like, well, we had it. They burnt it down.
Yeah,
Then they
like
denied
Tulsa.
us. Yes, yeah. They burnt the whole cities down. We had our own mayors and lawyers, and they went to Wilmington and killed us. So it's like, it's very hard to convince people to have hope and faith in something that has never showed them that it would even support a wish or a dream or a hope. So how, I'm not talking about, how do you combat that? Like how do you reach somebody who has already kind of predetermined, like you said, a person go, what's the point? There's no black capitalism. It's like, well, it actually is. Like, how do you get these people to see what you're saying is the truth, but it's hard to convince people that the system can benefit them?
And that's where I think it has to, that conversation that I'm offering has to be situated in examples, situated in like the practicality of how we can do this in community, and also the scalability of it. Because yes, we have those examples of where we have these isolated cities, towns where Black thriving was thriving, right? And they were systematically just dismantled. But I think what's unique, especially in this moment, the proliferation of technology, the proliferation of just how we're able to be so global, even at the local level, and connected with one another. Social media has transformed our ability to be in connection with each other. And so there are all these elements that I think add a level of nuance and newness to the conversation too. And I would also say the very fact that we are still here as Black people and still persisting, despite all of these calculated attempts to just rupture our idea of joy, of happiness, of thriving, and yet we are here, it's evidence to me that we still persist, we still try. And on that alone, should give us some of the bearing and taking heart to remember that there's opportunity still yet to unlock despite the wreckage that has been done against us. And I think the way we really secure thriving for ourselves is really by doing it together and continuing to.
And I worry that like you said, the resignation to no hope leads to this path of like, and then there's no real responsibility to the community because
Right.
nothing can be done anyway. So it's almost like, why not be resigned to this idea of like, this is how we have to live. We're just manipulating, abusing, and taking advantage of each other. Because it just seems like it very rarely leads to people doing the work of like, oh, and then we're gonna get a commune and we're gonna start trading chickens for corn, like we're gonna do this whole other thing. It's like, no, it really just is like people being like, it's not gonna work, but I'm gonna just go to my job and let what happens happen. One of the things I think about too is obviously in America, you know, capitalism is run amok, right? We've had the largest transfer of wealth to like this 1% of the population compared to like what people make, you know, what used to be like, oh, the CEO makes 5 times what the lowest paid employee works, or the median employee, and now it's like 250 times or whatever, right? So I think there's this obvious and justified anti like billionaire sentiment, like this anti like, dude, like Elon Musk is like renting our government, you know, like I get why people are like F that. And I think about that often encapsulated in Bernie Sanders, right? This guy who ran for office for president a couple. It sounds like he's been running for 12 years, but uh, but one of the things that to me is disappointing for about Bernie Sanders is that he leaves out so much of the marginalized issues that we experience that aren't just about being angry at billionaires, right? So like totally get it, billionaires, they're fucking up everything. Got it, Bernie. But then when I'm like, oh, and also like they got a bunch of racism and that's messing it up for black folks, it's like, whoa, that's identity politics. Oh, okay, well, women don't really have access to this capital as well. There's only like a small percentage of women that are even able to be like CEOs of a company or something. It's like, whoa, stop. That we're not talking about all that. We're just staying angry at Bill Gates. That's all we're doing. And I always wondered, like, does that hurt his long-term message? And at this point I have to imagine it's on purpose. Like, what is he afraid of at this point? Because I do think you could unify people around something where you're saying like, to me, the biggest example was the housing crisis, right? You had black people targeted by banks to give balloon payment loans they were not going to be able to afford. They get the house, then it gets taken away from them. Now they have a bunch of debt, right? It leads to like Wall Street having financial issues. It leads to the largest bailout in American history, with Barack Obama having to bail out Wall Street rather than have the country experience financial ruin. And I've always felt like that through line is such a perfect like message for someone like Bernie to be like, hey, it affects us all. Like, we should need to put some reins on this capitalism. We need to get it in a way where, like you said, almost like black capitalism for everybody, like a communal way of spreading this wealth. And I feel like that message is missed, and part of that is what makes people give up hope and be like, this is just what it is. We just have to like go and experience it in this way. So is that something that you seen, like that idea of like the anger at rich people, but not translating to any action that we can do amongst ourselves?
Oh, for sure. And I think that oftentimes too, when I talk to people and they're critiquing people like Jay-Z or Beyonce, right? It becomes this almost like accounting of other people's wallets and what they have access to, because it's a reflection and a reminder of what we might not have access to, or we might not have been able to have the opportunities and access in order to, manifest those resources for ourselves. And I think this is where so much excellent research around like the psychology of money really shows up in some of that economic trauma that some of us hold, because this kind of critique or even hate of billionaires and, their practices of tax evasion and whatnot, it's really much like just a stark reminder of how hard it is for so many people that are just striving to just make it. And meanwhile, you have, as you mentioned, people who are making 250 times their employee base and making a joke of it or acting as if this doesn't matter, or that there are not real stakes for this. And so a lot of that critique that you see, or just kind of the anger or rage, is really kind of rooted in the reality of we are living wildly different lives, that are not even parallel to each other. But just how is it that, people can be fighting just for their basic needs to be met? Whereas if this were something society wanted to solve, it could be solved. And I think that's what's the tragedy of it, is that the idea and the problem of homelessness, of, the housing crisis, et cetera, these aren't that big of, a nut to crack. We could solve it. It's very simple. The reality is that we've just decided as a society that we don't care.
It's so interesting because the pandemic was such a great example of this, because people were working from home. Then we had obviously all this empty office space in so many cities, and many people presented like some of the most obvious solutions of like, hey, why do we even have homelessness? we should house people in these empty, vacant buildings downtown. And the answer from, the CEO type class was like, get your ass back to work. That's what we really need, is y'all to come on in office in person. And I think remote work gave access to a lot of people to some of the privileges and luxuries that typically went along to, like, oh, this is the whitest of white collar jobs.
Yes.
You don't have to come into work every day. You can do, if you can just like tap in remotely, you can do that. It's not about watching you like a hawk every second.
Right.
And yet it's like, if you, almost every single time they interviewed the people who ran the business, they would be like, no, that is not what this is about. This is about y'all need to come your ass back in here and cough in each other's faces, because I'm paying for this office space. What do you think about the Target boycott? Because I feel like that is a thing that Black people are finding power in. It's like collective idea of, and it's not just Black people. I mean, they did away with a lot of DEI stuff. So like LGBTQ people, Hispanic people, like everybody that feels a way about them saying we are divesting from the initiatives we started for most of these companies after George Floyd was killed.
Right.
Don't ask me why those two things are related. I'm not sure. But they started investing in different communities and stuff, which I thought was a good thing.
Right.
At the time, I remember on our show being like, guys, this may not last forever. So
get your money while you
tap
can.
in while you can. Okay. We've gone through this in history before. The checkbooks close eventually. But if you can get something, go ahead and get it now. But don't necessarily believe that like a change has happened in the hearts and minds of a corporation, because it is a corporation,
and they're not people.
Yeah, they're responsible to shareholders, not necessarily in their minds, not necessarily responsible to communities. But like the Target boycott, I feel like is kind of renewed something in as far as like community, because before this, it really feels like it's almost hard to get the community organized.
Right.
And in this case, it's a boycott, which it's not bad. Like, I like that it's a boycott, but it's not the same as consolidating around like supporting Black businesses and like lifting ourselves out in that way. But what are your thoughts on, this moment and how we define our power, even if in a weird way, the power is buying into capitalism, right? We're saying, here's our money and we're going to let our money speak.
Yes, I think that's the magic word, power, because I think that oftentimes people feel most powerful in society when they're voting. And that's an experience that doesn't come often. It comes every so often. But the reality is that we should feel power every single day because of the fact that we hold money and we create transactions and we create exchange. And so the reality is that we're voting every single day with where we put our money. And I think what is exciting to me about this moment is the unification that's happening, the kind of communal efforts that are being drawn for people to move with one voice. I think especially when it comes to conversations about money, the economy, capitalism, we have been so bifurcated in the Black community, whether you be an anti-capitalist, a socialist, a capitalist, what have you. And so that's created this kind of like paralysis, I think, for us to be able to move with one unified voice, one unified wallet about how we're going to get through this moment that we're in. So I love it for that regard. I think what's always important when it comes to boycotting, because that's the positionality is one of like consumerism, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to withhold until my demands can be met. So one, it's what are the demands? And are we demanding things in a way that's going to be sustainable in the long term? It's not just about, when you look at these institutions, when things are in vogue, what's the flavor of the week? So what's something that we can see as like low-hanging fruit to adjust now, but with the intention to not create real systemic change in our organizations, but to appease the consumer in the immediate so that we can get them back and then just really kind of exploit them in a way. And so I think it's really important that the demands be sustainable in a way that's going to create systemic change. And then also, I think what's really important while we're boycotting, a parallel stream is also around how can we create channels for greater ownership? Because ideally, we wouldn't be in a scenario where we would be boycotting Target first and foremost. We would
Right.
rather have our own systems that are already operating and in service of us, not exploiting us, that we can turn to. And so I think it needs to be a both and. But in this moment where, again, the majority of Black people in this country, their positionality and their relationship to capitalism is one from a consumerist standpoint. And so if that's the case, it's like the demands have to be in such a way that they're going to be actionable, that they can be reported against, tracked against. It's not just kind of airy, hand wavy, concepts, but what is the actual bottom line around the different demands that we have? And so I think that is what points towards strategy, kind of systemic thinking that will create new outcomes in this bigger picture, and awareness of the cavalry isn't coming. Like, it's all on us to really address this. And so that piece around ownership is so pivotal to the conversation as well.
Yeah, the Target thing feels like such a throwback because it is in this world where everyone's so increasingly divided, even intra-community wise. It's one of the few times where like I don't know Black people that are like defending Target. Like I just like it's just one of the few times where like you can't find like even like Tabitha Brown, who has her like livelihood tied up in Target. When she does videos about it, it's not a like, man, y'all need to go ahead and start shopping at Target. It's always like this, okay, it is complicated, I understand, listen, okay, so some people you can like maybe find their own personal website and support them in that way. I'm not telling y'all to do, like, it's very much like of note that people seem to be of like one mind. We were driving by Target yesterday coming from the movies, and I just like, parked out front and just started judging the people going in. But
No, you did not.
But like I did notice, we live on the Black side of town. There were no Black people going in. It was kind of weird because like I was just joking about noticing, but I was like legitimately looking like, damn, really? Like this bottom line they're reporting of like we're losing money, it is real, and it's so interesting because I said this about the NFL and the Kaepernick thing. Is it a boycott or are we just mad? Because I think both things are valid.
Yes, both are valid.
Both things are valid. I'm not like, this is not to dismiss Black people's emotions, but like when you're mad, there's not really a thing they can do that's gonna make you be like, time to start supporting the NFL. Like, you're gonna be mad until you're not mad, whether that makes sense or not. Right. And a boycott, as Rachel said, you have these like trackable things. When you have like a bus boycott or something, it's like, we need these things met and then we'll all get back on the bus. I don't know that there is a demand from Target that they're gonna meet that Black people are like, and then we'll be back to Target. This may be a more permanent situation or a trickling of people coming back where like, okay, I was mad, but it's been a year and I really like the Rock's shampoo or whatever the fuck he's selling over there. Let me just go back.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on that, the thing is, the demand is to bring the DEI back. Like actually, like it's people don't want to admit that, but that's the demand, and they are not going to meet that right now. They're not going to meet that demand. So you talking to Al Sharpton isn't going to mean anything, because the thing is, not only were Black people mad, when this first popped off, I seen Latinos against this. Everybody. I seen like it was every group with a letter was like fuck Target.
And another thing, you didn't get an influx of like white grievance people. So you didn't even get like this new income from people being like, that's right, I said get rid of the DEI and I'm gonna go buy 12 shirts. Like, they're like F Target too, because they were just mad that they were even, once again, they weren't boycotting, they were mad. They were like, how dare you put like a shirt for LGBTQ pride in your store? I will never shop there again. So taking the shirt out didn't make those people come back. They're like, F y'all. So now you're just losing money in every direction.
Yes, and I personally think this. When the decision was made, they underestimated, truthfully, how many Black, brown, and others would invest in money in Target, and how much we actually love Target, and how for some people they only went there for certain products by women, black, whatever. Like they would go out of their way sometimes.
And then you end up like, man, that makes the Target joke really hit, because that is how, you know how we all had the same joke, like you go on Target for this and then you end up with $100 of stuff. That maybe that is how it hurts so bad, is because I would go in there for Bevel shaving cream.
Yes, you would.
And I would be like, well, damn, I guess I'll get a plate. And
yes, yeah, and that's true. Yeah, I'm in here for Tabitha Brown stuff, but because the thing is, Target, when people are going to Target, they would have displays, and their displays would be like, here is all the black shit. Right. Here is the black hairline. Here, like they would go out of their way to promote. Here is the and such like, and such a
I don't
brand.
Need an Afro pick cutting board,
but
if I'm gonna get one, I might as well get it while I'm out here at Target. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So like, I feel like, yeah, a lot of that, I forget what they call that type of purchasing, but what discretionary purchasing, that has to be why these numbers are so big. Because even I thought like, man, black people are mad, they're gonna lose some money. They start reporting to the shareholders like, we are really losing money. I'm like, damn, that much? And it's just because I'm sure everybody was like, if I'm not getting the cutting board, then I'm not getting the soap, and I'm not getting my
yes, because the thing online, people used to joke about how they were going to Target and you would leave out buying $300 and $400 and $500 worth of shit. Like, people joke, but they really would do that. And so all of a sudden, these people that would go monthly or weekly, or these people that would go like, we're doing Women's Month a certain time of the year to kind of boost these sales for these things, or they had special lines of things coming out. They underestimated the buying power, and now they do not know what to do. And now everybody's looking crazy because they do not know how to repair the damage. You guess this rule was for federal shit. You are a public institution. You did not have to opt to get your head chopped off, but you did.
Well, and the last thing too on that is, I think also it's systemic in the fact that white people always underestimate the buying power of blackness. I don't know why. You would think it. I truly cannot. I mean, other than racism, I truly can't understand.
Right.
I remember Sony, their emails got hacked, so like they had some leaks come out, and the woman who ran Sony at the time, one of the emails was her saying how they didn't know if they should do a sequel to Denzel's Equalizer franchise, which now has 3 movies, by the way.
It has 3 of them.
But at the time, she said, because I don't think he has global appeal. And I was like, do you know the world is more brown than white? Do you know that? And it's Denzel Washington, who's popular everywhere just for being Denzel Washington. Like, Denzel Washington low-key might be one of those people you could just put his face as the movie trailer and not even tell us the plot. Just be like,
agreed.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Denzel Washington, June 2nd. All right, I'm gonna be there. I don't know what it's about, but he doing something. So anyway, my point was the limits, racism or prejudice or whatever, it limits imaginations. So I would imagine that Target thought, and all these companies getting rid of DEI, I mean, who really cares? How much money could we possibly be making? We're probably spending more money to do it, and then
because they consider it a charity.
Here come the bottom line. It's like, it was profitable. All this stuff is profitable. Black Panther being the #1 movie of all time, making all that money, that's profit. It's not a charity. You didn't donate money to Ryan Coogler. You invested money, and then you got more money than anything else you were doing at the time, and yet somehow it feels like those profits immediately, it's like memory hold, and it's like, all right, back to just black people aren't worth catering to.
Yeah, and one more thing, the thing is, when you talk about how they always underestimate and shocked and surprised, it amazes me how racism consistently reboots their brains when it comes to movies, because now it's Sinners, but it was other movies.
Yeah, what a surprise!
That. Right,
what a surprise!
We have these other movies.
Every black person I know is like, when the movie coming out? We're going to see it. We're going to see it in IMAX for fucking $40 or whatever. Yes. Everybody going to see it. White Hollywood is, wow, it made money. I can't believe it. This is insane. Like, we have so much power in our economic.
But it's always a shock, and that's the part I don't get. Why is it always a fucking shock?
Rachel, let me ask you this: is the current administration, like having these people in charge, do you think that makes things more difficult, or does it give people like a unifying thing to rally against and come together? Like, how do you feel that will affect, you know, capital in the Black community?
Yeah, I think I don't know how it will, but how I hope it will is definitely towards unification, because I think we are seeing in the most clear way, there are no two ways about it, that they are not for us. All that we're seeing in terms of the political upheaval, all of the kind of targeted ways to roll back DE&I and anything in service of equitable is disproportionately harming and affecting us. And so in such a time as this, community and really kind of anchoring, getting together in a way to create solutions, because we can't find them outside of ourselves. And so I think the hope I have is that just the reality of that, because I think in past times, past administrations, it wasn't so in your face. Whereas now I think on this second pass in this Trump administration, the onus is really on us to create.
They arrested Cabby Lane, detained him for a little bit in Las Vegas. Immigration did for and I saw that right before we came on the air. I'm like, that man is one of the most famous people on the fucking planet. And not even like his voice. I don't know what he sound like. He like Mr. Bean to me. I still don't know what like.
It's a TikTok dude that don't say nothing.
This dude.
Oh, everybody know who he is. I don't not know what that man sounds like.
Low key, I do wonder. It's fucked up. But if they arrested him, did he do the thing when they was like,
sir,
we come with us? If he was like,
we need to speak.
They're like, sir, stop doing the thing. He's like, I'm not. I really want to know what the fuck y'all doing. but yeah, like I do feel like that stuff. It is so aggressive right now, and it leads people to community, because I think that's what gets us through. Not judging anybody, but I feel like when we see a lot of the protests now and they be very monochromatic, it's not looking like DEI to protest, because some of us are like, we're just doing things for us right now.
Y'all got it.
Y'all go out there, get arrested. Y'all go out there and march, make your cute signs. Like, we not knocking you for doing it. Like, go do it.
Same energy, but because it's a long fight.
Yeah, but just understand that I feel like Black people are kind of coalescing around each other right now.
Yes.
And so that, and in a way, it does give me hope. But it is sad that it would take these circumstances for that to happen, because it feels like something that should and could happen under any administration, in any direction. But yeah, I hope that stays.
Yeah, but I think that the moment that we're in, the climate that we're in, is kind of spurring us into kind of communal behaviors and mindset. The hope then becomes, and the question is, okay, well, what are the kind of tactics? What are the strategies that we're going to implement? Because it's not just then to be looking towards each other. It's like, okay, how do then we create the foundations and the kind of blueprint for how we're going to get through these 4 years, but long past that? Because again, we are seeing, it's like the Band-Aid's been ripped off. We know the reality of it. So let's get together. Let's think through the strategies that's going to really sustain us into, again, as I mentioned at the top of this call, what's going to be more liberatory, more equitable for all of us.
Yeah, and it's like, honestly, low-key, the easiest time to tell who's not for the rest of the people.
Yeah, because they stand out, and they stand out hard now.
Like, when you're looking
at, they could kind of blend in with the mix. Now you can't.
When you're looking at the like Black History celebration at the White House, and it's like Tiger Woods and like these, and you're like, okay, all right, you picked a side. Thank you for letting us know. Good luck over there. It normally doesn't work out well, but those that felt that you could use our community as a covering, like to be like, I'm here because Black people love Trump, and you're like, that's not true. Well, I'm Black and I love him. It's like, well, good luck with that, as long as you don't come over here. But I also did want to ask you about, I hope I'm saying this right. Is it Kelewele?
Kelewele.
Kelewele. Oh my God, that's what I wanted to say. But I listened to someone interview you, and they said Kelewele, and I was like, I guess I'm wrong. But now, can you tell us about that? Like, and are you still like doing that like whole lifestyle brand and all that?
Yeah. So Kelewele, long before it was the name of my business, it's actually the name of a popular Ghanaian street food. And it's basically you take ripe plantains, you dice it up, you coat it in spices, namely ginger. That's like the star ingredient aside from the plantains. And then you fry it up to golden perfection. And you typically see it enjoyed with groundnuts, which is like peanuts, basically. And I loved it. Growing up as a kid, my mom would make it for me. And so that was the beginning of what I call my plantain love story, because over the years, plantains grew more and more significance for me. Fast forward to when I was in college, I was at NYU, just like zero money to my name, just trying to get through college, pay for bills, whatever. And I was also transitioning into a plant-based diet at that time. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, like what's affordable? Because a lot of vegan food is very expensive.
Yes, it
And
is.
so I was like, okay, what can I eat that's going to meet my budget? And I kind of had this like aha moment of like plantains, because, at that time they've gotten more expensive, but at that time you could get like four for $1 in my neighborhood. And they were a dairy and meat substitute for me. And so I started just like eating them again, making all these different dishes. And then fast forward to when I was in grad school, I did my doctorate in anthropology and African American studies, but in anthropology specifically, we're always kind of concerned with this question of culture. How do we create culture? How's it sustained? How do people, derive identity by the cultural practices they participate in? And I had another aha moment of thinking about food as a medium to understanding culture, because I can be West African, the next person can be from Latin America, the next person from the Caribbean. Plantains show up in the culinary diet across the diaspora. We might be preparing it differently. We might be making mofongo, kelewele, whatever the dish is, maduros, but we're all eating plantains. And so I loved it as a way to think about connectivity and community making, with this flavor and kind of added concepts around innovation. Because, as I said, vegan food is very expensive, but oftentimes when I go to the grocery store and look at the vegan aisle, nothing was resonating with me culturally. And so I wanted to build a business that, had that kind of cultural familiarity, but then also gave you some creativity and innovation. Because, okay, we can all eat plantains, but have you ever had a plantain chocolate chip cookie before? You might not have, and so I wanted to build a business kind of around that kind of ideation. And so I launched it in 2018. And I started first, it was very grassroots. I was doing festivals and pop-ups. I'm based in Bed-Stuy, and so it was really in the neighborhood and community here. And then scaled to have a brick and mortar in downtown Brooklyn. I also had a stand at the Barclays Center shortly thereafter as well. And so I was doing all of that and really asking myself those kind of core questions when I think about what it even means to practice Black capitalism. Now that I'm a business owner, it's like, how do I build a business where the people who make up my team are happy to work, at Kelewele, and that they feel valued for their intrinsic value as people, not about just, the products that they create and the output that they create. And so asking myself these questions, because if I'm just here, practicing capitalism, I'm thinking about how do I squeeze those margins? How do I get the most out of my team and not pay them well, but rather put that money in my pocket? Those aren't the questions, right?
Yeah.
It's rather, how can I make sure I can create a sense of equilibrium and balance, while still running a business and having a strategy around that, but also making sure I'm prioritizing the people. And so that kind of became so much of my journey as I thought about Black capitalism in relation to entrepreneurship and Kelewele, this thing that, like I said, has been my plantain love story. And so now I've transitioned back into industry. So I work at JP Morgan Chase, but the business, Kelewele, still exists. I do e-commerce now, as well as wholesale distribution. So we've got a couple cafes in New York that carry our products as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting too, because it reminds me of the thing that made, like, to me, like, we have a segment on our show called Black Capitalism. Maybe we'll do that. We'll play that game in a second. But the thing that made it so funny to me was this idea of, like, Black people are like, we're fine, we're community based, we got a business, we're doing our thing, and I don't know what the number is, but there's like a number you hit, and then our minds switch online into, like, they're somewhere in the back of the room going, how do I squeeze the
Right,
money out of my
right.
fellow coworkers and the community?
I'm like, most of us don't function like that, and for a lot of people, depending on their situation, it was like, I will take a pay cut before I impact.
It's just so
these other
interesting
things,
to me
right?
to be like, good, evil. Like, I'm just like, what's the number? Like,
You cross that line, and all of a sudden,
like, it's one thing to do a thing. Like,
Yes.
any person of any race, gender, orientation can do something messed up. Like, I'm not saying like we need to defend people who abuse people, but it is so interesting to just magically arrive at they must be a bad person. It's just how else
you made $1 too much. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, you changed.
yeah, every day I'm looking at my bank account like, I'm getting
Am I too close? Right? I don't know what the number is.
let me give a little bit away. But so we have a segment called Black Capitalism, and it has a song and everything. And I would like to do a little Black Capitalism with you, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
We're just gonna highlight a Black capitalist. Let me pull up the song, the short version of it. All right, here we go. You may be able to hear the song. It may sound choppy, I don't know, but it's only 38 seconds, so we'll be right back.
Okay.
Shout out to Will Smith. I hear y'all talking, but the only thing I'm listening to is that paper. Every day we get into that paper. Woo! I hear the money talk, I see you later. Every day we get into that paper. Woo! I hear the money talk, I see you later.
All right, Black Capitalism. Today we're highlighting LSU star Flau'jae Johnson, who plays basketball.
Okay.
She also raps, by the way.
Mm.
And with the college basketball now, they have the NIL deal, so you can actually make money off of brand deals while you're in school.
Right.
Okay. So she teams up with Experian to wipe out $5 million in debt for Louisiana families.
Go ahead. Wow.
So she's a spokesperson for this initiative that will benefit 5,000 families in the state. She's a junior business major, and she's a strong advocate for financial literacy. She said, what's bigger than basketball? Financial empowerment. She says in a new commercial, finances are tough and Experian is helping the next generation pursue their dreams. That's why I'm excited to announce Experian is wiping out $5 million of debt for the families in Louisiana. Money isn't everything, but you need it to live a good life. The Experian app can help you save time and money, build your credit, and help you gain more knowledge in finances. So yeah, it was
Shout out to her, because not trying funny, we the only people that's gonna actually come to them with these ideas in the first place. And so the company, not trying funny, they wouldn't have thought about this on their own. And this is one of the, if not real close to one of the poorest states in the country now. And she's like, hey, I'm giving y'all a chance, your family a chance where y'all can get out here and create some financial wealth. Because the thing is, once you get into debt, it is very hard. It takes decades, sometimes generations, to get out of that debt.
The other thing that it makes me think about, she's 21. To be me thinking like this at 21.
Yes, at 21.
Because I'm be real, like if they came to me and was like, hey, we want a brand deal, however much money, I'm like, whatever y'all want me to say, I'll say, Experian, it's the best. To even be like, yo, how does this help the community that I play basketball in, that is a very black state, for the record, like Louisiana, Alabama, even though people can think of them as conservative, red states, they're conservative and red because of voter suppression. They're conservative and red because of like marginalization. So for her to even be attached to something that's going to benefit these families is amazing.
And another thing, back to the conversation before, you have a generation that has hope that sometimes our generation lost in the mix somewhere because life just beat us up. And you also, now you have to come in with already having a brand, already having a name, like the things that a lot of us were taught later on in life it's like they grew up in the generation of the internet, and the generation of your parents meant something, your online presence meant something, followers and all that stuff.
And they've probably been educated and activated via social media as well to be like, this is even on my periphery.
Yeah, so they see what works and what doesn't work, and they probably seen people fail and things like that. So they're for, even though I still also think that's really young, they came in with like a package. Like they sat down and talked to somebody and kind of got that package together and then presented it.
Yeah, that's good for her. Can you tell people where to get the book? You know, when it's dropping, all of that good stuff, so we can help you also get some of this capital and hopefully get educated and get some like hope and knowledge about us in as well.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the book drops June 10th, so just a few short days, Tuesday, June 10th. And you can get it wherever you buy books. Make it a Black-owned bookstore. There's so many that you can access. Some that I love, Baldwin & Co. They're based in NOLA. I'm having even my launch this Tuesday for anyone that's local in partnership with Cafe Con Libros. As well as a retailer next Friday for another event, Black Gotham Experience, also based in New York. And so there are a lot of excellent bookstores to grab the book from. And I think just the biggest hope for the book is around unified action. We spoke to it a little bit before around, you know, we've been having decades-long conversations about our relationship to the economy, what we should do, how do we create economic power that's going to create new outcomes for ourselves. And, you know, while the conversation is worthy and important and necessary, action is what's going to make the difference. And so the hope is you get the book, you read it, you know, you lock arms with folks, you debate, we talk through it, but we land on what is it we're going to do to get us from now to that point of real liberation for us. And so, yeah, I just hope folks are able to enjoy it. Let me know what they think, because I really do hope and think that there's so much promise for us. And so it's really about how can we create the strategy to tap into that.
Well, that's dope. Like I said, we don't know each other or whatever. This is our first time meeting, but I'm very like proud of the fact that like writing a book's hard anyway, but just the fact that you're willing to like entertain this conversation in this time, because I feel like it's such a like triggering, even the phrase is like, oh, I'm ready to kill somebody just off of, I don't even want to discuss it. So like, you know, I'm just, look, we're gonna put the prayer hands around you, and that, you know, your online and everything is fine with it, because it's definitely a worthwhile conversation and something that I wish people did approach with nuance, because it's not as simple as, you know, X amount of money, bad person. And we just need to get away from that, because we're going to need resources to survive, even let alone to thrive. So make sure you check the book out. It's Black Capitalist, plural, A Blueprint for What is Possible. We'll have the link in the show notes when the episode is out. And we'll see y'all again throughout the week. I know Tuesday we have Brandon Collins on from Drunk Black History, so we'll definitely be here Tuesday. And it'll really depend on how we feel Monday and Wednesday, if we do the regular show or not. So, you know, we'll talk to you guys then. Until next time, I love you.
I love you too.
Mwah. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you,
Rachel.
sweet.